Excuse me, sir. My mom owns a ring that looks just like yours. The billionaire froze at her words. A story about secrets buried in gold, a child's innocent observation, and the collision of two worlds that should never have met, but were always destined to. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Grand Regency Ballroom at exactly 9:47 p.m., and for Theodore Strode, that sound marked the moment his carefully constructed life began to crack. He stood frozen, 6'3" of tailored Armani and controlled power, staring down at a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She had dark curls that cascaded past her shoulders, eyes the color of warm honey, and a purple dress with a juice stain on the collar. She was completely out of place among the crystal chandeliers and the city's elite, and she was looking at his hand with an expression that made his blood run cold. "Excuse me, sir," she said again, her small voice cutting through the chamber music and polite laughter. "My mom owns a ring that looks just like yours." Theodore's right hand, the one wearing the platinum signet ring with the distinctive wolf's head crest and the 3 small diamonds arranged in a constellation, trembled. Just once. Just enough. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, and if this is your first time here, you've just stumbled onto something special. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. How are you doing today? I genuinely want to know. And listen, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are we waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now because you're not going to want to miss what happens next in this story. Trust me on this one. Now, back to Theodore and the little girl who just detonated a bomb in the middle of his charity gala. The thing about Theodore Strode was that he never froze. Not when his father died and left him a crumbling empire at 23. Not when hostile takeovers threatened to destroy everything he'd rebuilt. Not when board members twice his age tried to muscle him out. Theodore Strode was known for 3 things: his ruthless business acumen, his ice-water composure, and the fact that he never, ever wore his heart on his sleeve. But he was wearing that ring. And this child, this impossible child, had recognized it. "Sweetie, I think you're mistaken," he managed, his voice rougher than intended. The ballroom suddenly felt too hot, too crowded, too exposed. "This is a family heirloom. It's one of a kind." The girl tilted her head, considering him with the brutal honesty only children possess. "That's what my mom says about hers too. She says it's special. She keeps it in a blue box in her drawer and sometimes she cries when she looks at it." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Theodore's handmade Italian shoes. "Emma. Emma, there you are." A woman's voice, breathless, panicked, cut through the moment. Theodore watched as a figure rushed through the crowd, weaving between men in tuxedos and women draped in diamonds. She was wearing a server's uniform, black and white and completely unremarkable, except for the way his entire body recognized her before his mind could catch up. Impossible. The word ricocheted through his skull like a bullet. 12 years. 12 years since he'd seen that face. 12 years since those green eyes had looked at him with anything other than the terror he saw in them now. "Rose," he whispered. Rose Dawson, though he'd known her as Rose DeWitt when she'd been his father's personal assistant, when she'd been 22 and he'd been 24, when they'd spent one summer tangled in hotel sheets and whispered promises neither of them should have made. Rose Dawson, who had disappeared without a trace 3 months before his father died. Rose Dawson, who was now grabbing the little girl's hand with white-knuckled desperation. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Strode," she said, her voice professionally neutral, but he could hear the tremor underneath. "My daughter wandered off. It won't happen again. Emma, come on. Now." But Emma was still staring at the ring. "Mom, look. It's just like Emma. Now." The command in Rose's voice made the girl flinch, and something sharp twisted in Theodore's chest. He watched, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but calculate the timeline, as Rose pulled Emma toward the service entrance. 7 years old. Maybe 8. 3 months before his father died, Rose had vanished. 9 months was the gestation period for a human child. The ring on his finger suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. There were only 2 rings like this in the world. His father had commissioned them 30 years ago, one for himself, one for the son he'd hoped Theodore would become. When his father died, Theodore had inherited both. He wore his own every day. The other was supposed to be in a safety deposit box in Geneva. Unless his father had given it to someone else. Unless Rose had been telling the truth about the blue box in her drawer. Unless that little girl with the honey-colored eyes and the devastating smile was. Theodore? Theodore, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. The voice belonged to Victoria Corleone, his date for the evening and the CFO of Strode Industries. Beautiful, brilliant, and completely wrong for him in ways he'd been ignoring for 6 months. She touched his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light, and he realized his hands were shaking. I'm fine, he lied. I need a moment. But he wasn't fine. Because across the ballroom, Rose Dawson had just disappeared through the service door with a child who might be his daughter, and the only thing Theodore knew for certain was that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. What just happened? Who was Emma really? And why did Rose run away 12 years ago? Drop your theories in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what you think is going on here. Theodore didn't follow them. Not immediately. Years of corporate warfare had taught him that the first move was rarely the right one. So instead, he excused himself from Victoria with a practiced smile, made his way to his private office on the 3rd floor of the hotel, and did what he always did when the world stopped making sense. He gathered information. His hands were steadier now as he pulled up the employee records for tonight's catering staff. Rose Dawson. Age 34. Employed by Prestige Events for 3 years. Current address, 1247 Maple Street, apartment 3B, in a neighborhood that made his jaw tighten. References excellent. Performance reviews glowing. No emergency contact listed except a neighbor named Martha Cooper. No mention of a husband. No mention of Emma's father. Theodore leaned back in his leather chair and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing through memories he'd locked away in a vault marked past mistakes and almost loves. Rose DeWitt had arrived at Strode Industries in the spring, 12 years ago, fresh out of business school with honors she couldn't afford to celebrate and student loans that would take a lifetime to repay. His father, Richard Strode, a man who collected talented people the way others collected art, had hired her as his personal assistant within 15 minutes of her interview. Theodore had been traveling then, closing a deal in Singapore, building his reputation as the heir who might actually deserve the empire. He hadn't met Rose until he returned that June. He'd walked into his father's office to drop off contracts, and there she was, green eyes focused on 3 computer screens simultaneously, auburn hair twisted into a messy bun, fielding phone calls in flawless French while simultaneously reorganizing his father's calendar with the precision of a battlefield general. She'd looked up when he entered, and something had shifted in the universe. You must be Theodore, she'd said, not rising, not flustered, not like every other assistant who'd preceded her. Your father speaks highly of you. The contracts go in the blue folder, not the red one. The red ones are for international acquisitions. Common mistake. He'd been simultaneously irritated and intrigued. And you are? Necessary, she'd replied with the ghost of a smile. Also, Rose. Rose DeWitt. Don't worry, most people underestimate me at first. You'll learn. She'd been right. Within 2 months, she'd become indispensable to his father. Within 3, Theodore had started finding excuses to visit the executive floor. Within 4, they'd been having coffee together every morning, conversations that started about market trends and somehow wandered into philosophy, dreams, the weight of family expectations. Your father thinks I don't notice, she'd said one morning in August, both of them alone in the break room at 6 a.m. But he's grooming you to take over. Everything he does, every decision, every meeting, he's teaching you. And what about you? Theodore had asked. What are you being groomed for? She'd looked at him then with an expression he couldn't read. To disappear when I'm no longer useful, probably. People like me don't get happy endings in places like this. People like you? Scholarship kids. First-generation college students. Girls from nowhere trying to become someone. She'd smiled, but it hadn't reached her eyes. Don't worry, Theodore. I know the score. I'm not expecting the fairy tale. What if I am? The words had come out before he could stop them. That was the moment everything changed. They'd tried to keep it professional. Tried and failed spectacularly. Late nights working on presentations became late nights talking about everything else. Coffee meetings became dinner. Dinner became stolen kisses in his car. Stolen kisses became Rose sneaking into his apartment after midnight, both of them pretending this wasn't the most reckless thing they'd ever done. His father couldn't know. The board couldn't know. It was inappropriate, potentially disastrous, completely against company policy. It was also the most real thing Theodore had ever felt. I'm going to tell him, Theodore had said one night in September, Rose curled against his chest in his bed, the city lights painting shadows across her bare shoulders. I'm going to tell my father about us. We'll figure it out. You can't. Her voice had been small, frightened. Theodore, you don't understand. If he finds out, I lose everything. My job, my reputation, my chance at a career. Men like you get to have inappropriate relationships and move on. Women like me get labeled and destroyed. Then I'll protect you. You can't protect me from the world. That's not how this works. She'd turned to face him, her green eyes fierce. Promise me something. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll remember that I never wanted to hurt you. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me, Theodore. He'd promised. And 3 weeks later, she was gone. No resignation letter. No forwarding address. No explanation. His father had been furious, not about the relationship, which Theodore had learned later Richard had known about all along, but about the missing files. Sensitive documents. Acquisition strategies. Private financial records. She played us both, Richard had said, his face gray with betrayal and something that looked like genuine pain. I trusted her. God help me, I thought of her like a daughter. And she was probably working for Vance the entire time. Vance Industries, their biggest competitor. It had made sense. The timing, the missing files, the way she'd had access to everything. Theodore had tried to find her. Hired investigators, followed leads that went nowhere. After 6 months, he'd given up. After a year, he'd convinced himself he'd imagined the connection. After 5 years, he'd almost believed it. But he'd never stopped wearing the ring. And apparently, neither had she. Theodore's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria, everything okay? You disappeared. He stared at the message, then at the employee file on his screen. Rose Dawson, apartment 3B. A single mother working catering jobs. Living in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than birdsong. If Emma was his daughter, and every instinct he possessed was screaming that she was, then Rose had been raising her alone for 7 years. While he'd been building his fortune, expanding his empire, sleeping in silk sheets, Rose had been. What? Running? Hiding? From what? From whom? From him? The thought made him sick. Sir? His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Miss Corleone is asking if you'll be returning to the gala. The silent auction is about to close. Theodore looked at his watch. 10:15 p.m. The catering staff would be cleaning up soon, preparing to leave. Rose would disappear again, and this time he might never find her. Not this time. Tell Victoria I had an emergency, he said, already grabbing his jacket. And Marcus? It's Stephen, sir. Stephen. I need you to pull the schedule for prestige events. I want to know every job Rose Dawson is assigned to for the next month. And I need it in an hour. Yes, sir. Is there anything else? Theodore paused at the door, his hand on the frame. Find out if there's a birth certificate on file for Emma Dawson. Date of birth, hospital, any medical records. Be discreet. There was a pause. Sir, is everything all right? No, Theodore said quietly. But it's about to be. He took the service elevator down to the kitchen level, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it never did during multi-million-dollar negotiations. The kitchen was chaos, staff rushing to pack up equipment, managers barking orders, the smell of expensive food and industrial cleaning supplies. He spotted her immediately. Rose stood at the far end of the kitchen, wiping down serving trays with mechanical efficiency, her auburn hair escaping from a ponytail. She looked tired. More than tired, exhausted in a way that spoke of years, not hours. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and she was thinner, sharper, like life had whittled her down to nothing but edges. She was still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Emma sat on a chair nearby, swinging her legs, drawing something on a napkin with a pen someone had given her. As Theodore watched, Rose glanced over at her daughter every 30 seconds, that unconscious monitoring system all parents develop. His daughter. Possibly. Probably. God, what was he supposed to do with that? He started walking toward them, and Rose must have sensed him because her head snapped up. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and he watched every emotion play across her face in rapid succession: shock, fear, resignation, and something else. Something that looked almost like relief. She said something to Emma, "Stay there, probably," and walked toward him, intercepting him before he could reach her daughter. "We need to talk," Theodore said. "No, we really don't." Rose's voice was low, urgent. "Please, Theodore. Just let me finish my shift and leave. Forget you saw us." "Is she mine?" The question hung between them like a live grenade. Rose's face went pale. "Don't do this." "Not here." "Is she mine?" "You don't have the right to ask me that." "The hell I don't." His voice came out louder than intended, and several kitchen staff turned to look. Theodore forced himself to breathe, to lower his voice. "You disappeared, Rose. For 12 years, I thought you'd betrayed me, betrayed my father, stolen from us. And now you show up with a 7-year-old daughter wearing my family ring, and you're telling me I don't have the right to ask?" "She's 8, Rose whispered. "She just turned 8. And that ring was a gift. From my father." "Yes." "When?" Rose's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "The day I left." He knew, Theodore. About us. About everything. And he gave me that ring and told me to run. So I did. Theodore felt like he'd been punched. "What are you talking about? Why would he tell you to run?" "Because." "Mom?" They both turned. Emma had abandoned her drawing and was walking toward them, her honey-colored eyes full of concern. "Mom, are you okay? Is this man bothering you?" The protective edge in her small voice nearly broke him. Rose immediately shifted, putting herself slightly between Theodore and Emma, her body language screaming threat assessment. "I'm fine, baby. This is an old friend. Mr. Strode." "The billionaire?" Emma's eyes went wide. "The one whose party this is?" "That's right," Theodore said, crouching down to her level, his throat tight. Up close, the resemblance was devastating. She had his father's nose. His mother's chin. His eyes. His eyes. "I'm sorry I interrupted your party," Emma said solemnly. "And I'm sorry about the ring thing. I didn't mean to be rude." "You weren't rude," Theodore managed. "You were observant. That's a good quality." Emma brightened. "My mom says that too. She says I notice everything. Sometimes too much." She held up her napkin drawing. Look, I drew the ballroom. See? That's the chandelier, and those are all the fancy people, and that's you with your ring. Sure enough, she'd captured the scene with surprising detail for an 8-year-old. And there, on the crude stick figure that represented him, she'd carefully drawn the ring. You're very talented, Theodore said, and meant it. I want to be an artist when I grow up. Or maybe a detective. I haven't decided yet. Emma looked up at her mother. Can we go home soon? I'm tired. Yes, baby. Just let me finish cleaning up. I'll help. Emma rushed back to grab a rag, leaving Theodore and Rose alone again. Coffee, Theodore said. Tomorrow. You pick the place, you pick the time, but we're having this conversation, Rose. You owe me that much. I don't owe you anything. You owe her the truth. About who her father is. Rose's composure finally cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek, and she wiped it away angrily. You have no idea what you're asking. No idea what's at stake. Then explain it to me. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Rose looked at him with such profound sadness that it hurt to hold her gaze. You think you want answers, Theodore, but trust me, you're better off not knowing. We both are. Just let us go. Please. I can't do that. Why not? You did before. The accusation stung because it was fair. He had stopped looking for her eventually. Had convinced himself she wasn't worth finding. I was wrong, he said simply. I gave up. I shouldn't have. And I'm not making that mistake again. Rose opened her mouth to respond, but Emma came running back, and whatever she'd been about to say died on her lips. All done. Emma announced proudly. Can we go now? Yes. Rose took her daughter's hand, then looked at Theodore one last time. Don't follow us. Don't look for us. If you ever cared about me at all, you'll let this go. I can't. Then God help us both, Rose whispered, and walked away. Theodore stood in the kitchen and watched them disappear through the service exit, his past and his possible future, walking out the door together. He pulled out his phone and called his head of security. Daniel, I need a protective detail. Discreet, professional, best people we have. For you, sir? No. For a woman and child. I'll send you the details. They're not to know they're being watched, but I want eyes on them 24/7. Nobody gets near them without me knowing about it. Understood. Threat assessment? Theodore thought about the fear in Rose's eyes, the way she'd positioned herself between him and Emma, the desperate edge in her voice. Unknown, he said. But real. Very real. He hung up and looked down at his ring, the wolf's head crest that had been in his family for 3 generations. Somewhere across the city, Rose had an identical ring in a blue box. A gift from his father. A secret that had been kept for 8 years. What do you think Richard Strode knew? And why would he tell Rose to run? Drop your theories in the comments. I have a feeling some of you are going to figure this out before Theodore does. Theodore walked back to the elevator, his mind already working through the puzzle. He'd built an empire by understanding patterns, by seeing connections others missed. And every instinct he possessed was telling him that Rose hadn't stolen anything 12 years ago. She'd been protecting something. Or someone. Him? Emma? Both? Only one thing was certain, he was going to find out the truth. Even if it destroyed everything he thought he knew. Theodore didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse apartment, 43rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and did what he did best, he investigated. By 3 a.m., he'd compiled a dossier that made his blood run cold. Rose Dawson. Born Rose DeWitt in Portland, Oregon. Full scholarship to Columbia. Graduated top of her class. Hired by Strode Industries at 22. Disappeared at 23 without a trace. Then nothing. A complete void for 8 months. Then, Emma Rose Dawson, born at Mercy General Hospital on March 15, 8 years ago. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. Mother's occupation, unemployed. The timeline was damning and perfect. Rose had disappeared in June. Emma had been born the following March. 9 months exactly. But it was the other information that made Theodore's hands shake. Rose had changed her name legally 3 months after Emma's birth. DeWitt to Dawson. She'd moved apartments 7 times in 8 years, always to worse neighborhoods, always paying cash, always leaving no forwarding address. She worked 2 jobs, catering events and tutoring college students in business management. She'd turned down 3 job offers from major corporations in the past 5 years. Jobs that would have paid well enough to move them out of that terrible neighborhood. It was the pattern of someone hiding. Or someone running. At 6 a.m., his phone rang. Daniel, his head of security. "Sir, we have a problem." Theodore's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The woman and child. They're being watched." "By whom?" "Not sure yet." "Professional outfit. 2 vehicles rotating surveillance. They picked them up the moment Ms. Dawson left the hotel last night. Our team spotted them immediately." Theodore was already on his feet, reaching for his jacket. "Are they safe?" "For now. But sir, there's something else. We ran facial recognition on Ms. Dawson through our databases, cross-referenced with unsolved cases and missing persons reports. And? 12 years ago, there was an investigation. Corporate espionage case involving Strode Industries and Vance Industries. Your father was the primary victim. The case was dropped suddenly, files sealed. But there's a notation in the police database, a witness protection inquiry that was denied." Theodore's heart was hammering now. Rose was trying to get into witness protection? Not her. Someone was trying to put her in it. The request came from Richard Strode himself, 3 days before she disappeared. It was denied on grounds of insufficient threat evidence. The next notation in the file is dated 2 weeks later, subject relocated independently. Case closed. His father had tried to protect Rose. Had given her the ring and told her to run. From what? Sir, whoever's watching her now, they're not amateurs. And they've been doing it for a while. We found evidence of previous surveillance going back at least 2 years. Intermittent but consistent. I want full protection detail. I don't care what it costs. Nobody touches her or that little girl. Already in place. But Theodore, Daniel rarely used his first name. Whatever your father was protecting her from, it's still out there. And someone knows she resurfaced. Theodore showed up at Rose's apartment building at 7:30 a.m. with coffee and answers he didn't have yet. The building was worse than he'd imagined, peeling paint, broken intercom, the smell of mildew and resignation. Apartment 3B was on the 3rd floor, no elevator. He knocked. The door opened 2 inches, held by a chain lock. Rose's green eyes appeared in the gap, and they were red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep. Possibly both. I told you not to come. And I told you we need to talk. I brought coffee. He held up the cups. Please, Rose. 5 minutes. Emma's getting ready for school. Then we'll talk quietly. A long pause. Then the door closed, the chain rattled, and it opened again. Rose stood there in jeans and an oversized sweater, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, looking both achingly familiar and like a complete stranger. The apartment behind her was small but immaculate. Worn furniture that had been carefully maintained. Emma's artwork covering one entire wall. Books everywhere, stacked on shelves, piled on the coffee table, library books with due date stamps. It was the home of someone who had very little and treasured everything. You shouldn't be here, Rose said, taking the coffee but not inviting him in further. You're making this so much harder. Making what harder? Everything. Staying hidden. Keeping her safe. Keeping you, she stopped, pressed her lips together. You need to leave. Not until you tell me the truth. Is Emma my daughter? Rose's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't fight them. Yes. The word hit him like a physical blow. He'd known, had been almost certain, but hearing it confirmed made his knees weak. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you run? Because your father, Rose's voice broke. Theodore, your father was a good man. A complicated man, but good. And 3 days before I left, he called me into his office and showed me something. Evidence. Proof that someone was using me to get to him. To you. Vance Industries. No. God, I wish it had been that simple. Rose glanced toward Emma's bedroom door, closed, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. Harrison Vance was a symptom, not the disease. Your father discovered that someone inside Strode Industries, someone high up, was selling information. Not just to Vance, but to everyone. Corporate rivals, foreign investors, anyone who wanted to take down the Strode empire. Theodore's blood went cold. Who? He wouldn't tell me. Said it was safer if I didn't know. But Theodore, whoever it was, they were using me. They'd planted bugs in my apartment, my car, my desk. Every conversation we had, every private moment, someone was listening. The implications crashed over him like a wave. Their relationship. Their plans. Every vulnerable thing he'd ever said to her. Oh God, he whispered. Your father found out I was pregnant 3 days before I disappeared. I hadn't told you yet because I was scared, and I was trying to figure out how to make it work, and then Richard called me in and told me everything. He said if I stayed, they'd use Emma against you. Against him. Against the whole family. So he gave me money, gave me the ring, and told me to disappear. He should have told me. He couldn't. Don't you see? He didn't know who was listening. Who was watching. He said the only way to keep our daughter safe was if no one knew she existed. So I became Rose Dawson. I moved constantly. I worked jobs that paid cash. I made sure no paper trail led back to you. Theodore's mind was racing. But someone found you anyway. Rose's face went pale. What? You're being watched. Right now. Professional surveillance, at least 2 years' worth. Daniel spotted them last night. The coffee cup slipped from Rose's fingers, splashing across the worn carpet. No. No, no, no. They promised if I stayed away. Who promised? Rose, who are you talking about? Mom? Emma's voice came from the bedroom doorway. She was wearing a school uniform, plaid skirt, white shirt, her curls pulled into a ponytail. Her backpack was almost as big as she was. I'm ready for school. Are you okay? You look sad. Rose immediately shifted, wiping her eyes, forcing a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just spilled some coffee. Go brush your teeth one more time, okay? But I already. Emma. Please. Something in Rose's voice made the little girl's eyes go wide. She looked at Theodore, then back at her mother, and nodded silently before disappearing into the bathroom. The moment she was gone, Rose grabbed Theodore's arm with surprising strength. You have to go. Right now. Before they see you here, before they make the connection. It's too late for that. They already know. Someone at that gala recognized you, or saw Emma, or, Theodore stopped as another possibility occurred to him. The ring. You said you keep it in a blue box. Does Emma know where it is? Of course she does. She likes to look at it sometimes. She knows it's important, even if she doesn't know why. Where is it? Right now? Rose hesitated, then walked to her bedroom. Theodore followed. She opened her closet, moved aside a stack of sweaters, and pulled out a small velvet box. Blue, like she'd said. She opened it. The ring was identical to his. Platinum band, wolf's head crest, 3 diamonds. But as Theodore looked closer, he saw something he'd never noticed on his own, tiny engraving inside the band. For the ones I love most. His father's handwriting, etched in metal. He gave you this the day you left? Yes. Said it was proof. That if anything ever happened to him, if I ever needed to prove Emma's connection to the family, this would be enough. Along with, Rose reached into the box again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Theodore unfolded it. It was a letter, in his father's handwriting. To whom it may concern. This letter serves as acknowledgement that Rosemarie DeWitt is under my personal protection and that of Strode Industries. The child she carries is blood of my blood, family of my family. Should any harm come to either of them, the full resources of this organization will be brought to bear against those responsible. Richard Theodore Strode. It was dated 2 days before Rose disappeared. And it was notarized. He knew he was dying, Theodore said slowly. He knew, and he was trying to protect you both. He had 6 months, the doctors said. He didn't think, Rose's voice broke. He died 3 weeks later. Heart attack. And I couldn't even go to the funeral because I was 7 months pregnant and terrified. Theodore pulled her into his arms without thinking, and for a moment, she let him. She felt smaller than he remembered, more fragile, and he realized with a start that she was trembling. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. God, Rose, I'm so sorry. I should have found you. Should have known something was wrong. You couldn't have known. That was the point. But I gave up on you. I believed you'd betrayed me. Rose pulled back, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. Maybe that was easier for both of us. The bathroom door opened. Emma emerged, toothbrush in hand. Mom, we're going to be late for school. Mrs. Chen said if I'm late again, I can't be line leader next week. And if you're loving this story so far, do me a favor and tell me in the comments what you think is going to happen next. Are Rose and Emma really in danger, or is there something else going on? Subscribe if you haven't already because this story is about to get intense. Rose immediately switched back into mom mode, bustling around, grabbing Emma's lunch bag from the tiny kitchen. You're right, baby. Let's go. Mr. Strode was just leaving. Can I come with you? Theodore asked. To drop her off? Absolutely not. Mom, who is he? Emma asked, looking at Theodore with open curiosity. You keep crying when he's around. Is he a bad man? No, Rose said quietly. No, he's an old friend. A very old friend. Then why can't he come with us? Theodore knelt down again, meeting Emma's eyes, his eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. A door opening. A lock breaking. Because your mom is trying to protect you. And she's very good at her job. Protect me from what? Emma, we need to go. Now. But Emma was still looking at Theodore with that unnerving directness. Are you my dad? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rose went white. Emma, why would you? Because you keep that ring like it's treasure, and you said it was a gift from someone special. And he has the same ring. And you're acting weird. And Mrs. Chen says when adults act weird, it's usually about family stuff. She crossed her arms. So are you? My dad? Theodore looked at Rose, whose eyes were pleading with him. To say no. To lie. To protect this fragile piece they'd built on secrets and distance. He looked back at Emma, at this fierce, brilliant little girl who deserved the truth. Yes, he said. I am. Rose made a sound like she'd been struck. Emma tilted her head, processing. Oh. Okay. Does that mean you're rich? Despite everything, Theodore almost laughed. Yes. Very. Cool. Can you pay for my art classes? Mom says they're too expensive, but I really want to learn watercolors. Emma. Rose's voice was sharp with panic and something else. Go wait in the hallway. Right now. But. Now. Emma grabbed her backpack and fled, the apartment door slamming behind her. The moment she was gone, Rose rounded on Theodore. How dare you? How dare you tell her without asking me first? She's not ready. I'm not ready. You don't get to just waltz back into our lives after 8 years and... She stopped because Theodore's phone was ringing. Daniel's number. He answered. What? Sir, you need to leave that building immediately. The surveillance team just got reinforcements. 3 vehicles, 6 men. They're moving toward the building now. Theodore's blood turned to ice. How long? 2 minutes. Maybe less. Sir, we can extract you, but the woman and child. You protect them first. That's an order. He hung up and grabbed Rose's arm. We need to leave. Now. There are people coming, and they're not here to talk. What? Theodore, what are you? He pulled her toward the door, yanked it open. Emma was sitting in the hallway, still wearing her backpack, looking small and scared. Is someone coming to hurt us? She asked in a small voice. Theodore scooped her up before Rose could protest. She weighed almost nothing. Not if I have anything to say about it. Rose, is there a back way out of this building? The fire escape, but... Show me. They ran. The fire escape was a rusted death trap bolted to the side of the building with what looked like hope and prayers. Theodore held Emma against his chest with one arm while helping Rose through the window with the other, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. Down, he ordered. Fast as you can. Rose didn't argue. She climbed down the metal ladder with practiced efficiency, clearly she'd used this route before, while Theodore followed with Emma clinging to his neck like a baby monkey. I'm scared, Emma whispered against his shoulder. I know, sweetheart. But I've got you. I promise. They'd just reached the second-floor landing when Theodore heard it, the crash of splintering wood from above. Someone had kicked in Rose's apartment door. Faster, he hissed. Rose dropped the last 6 feet to the alley below, landing in a crouch. Theodore handed Emma down to her, then jumped himself, his expensive shoes hitting the grimy pavement with a jarring impact. This way, Rose said, already moving. She grabbed Emma's hand and ran deeper into the alley, away from the street. Theodore followed, pulling out his phone. Daniel, we're in the alley behind the building. Where are your people? Black SUV, end of the alley, 30 seconds out. Sir, the men who entered the building, they're not carrying weapons openly, but our thermal scan suggests. I don't care what they're carrying. Just get us out of here. They burst out of the alley just as a sleek black vehicle screeched to a halt in front of them. The door flew open, and a man in a dark suit, Daniel himself, gestured urgently. In. Now. Rose hesitated for a fraction of a second, her protective instincts warring with survival instinct. Theodore made the choice for her, physically lifting both her and Emma into the vehicle before diving in himself. The door wasn't even closed before the driver floored it. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, taking random turns, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. Emma sat between Theodore and Rose in the back seat, her small hand gripped tight in her mother's, her eyes wide with fear. Finally, Daniel turned from the front passenger seat. We're clear. Where to, sir? Theodore looked at Rose. My penthouse. It's secure, fully monitored, and... No. Rose's voice was firm despite the tremor in it. Absolutely not. That's the first place they'll look. They don't know who I am to you. There's been no public connection between us for 12 years. They kicked in my door, Theodore. They obviously know something. Then where do you suggest we go? Back to your apartment? A hotel where you'll have to show ID? Rose opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. Mom? Emma's voice was very small. Who were those people? Why did we have to run? Rose pulled her daughter close, pressing a kiss to her curly hair. I don't know, baby. But we're safe now. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Theodore said quietly. Rose's eyes flashed with anger. Don't tell me how to parent my daughter. Our daughter. The words hung in the air between them. Emma looked up at both of them, processing, and Theodore saw the moment it really sank in for her. Her eyes, his eyes, filled with tears. Are we in trouble because of me? She asked. Because I talked to you at the party? No, Theodore and Rose said simultaneously. This isn't your fault, Theodore continued, reaching out to touch her shoulder. None of this is your fault. The people who are causing problems, they're the bad guys. Not you. Never you. Then who are they? It was the question Theodore had been asking himself since last night. Rose's explanation about corporate espionage didn't fully make sense. His father had died 8 years ago. Whatever conspiracy he'd uncovered, whatever threat he'd been protecting Rose from, why would it still be active now? Unless... Rose, Theodore said slowly, what did my father actually tell you? His exact words about the threat? Rose bit her lip, thinking. He said someone inside the company was selling secrets. That they'd been doing it for years. And that they were willing to hurt anyone who got in their way. Inside the company. Someone who would still be there now. That's impossible. You've run Strode Industries for 8 years. You would have noticed. Would I? Theodore pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. My board of directors. How many of them were there when my father was alive? Rose went pale. All of them. Richard kept the same inner circle for 20 years. Said loyalty was worth more than talent. Daniel, Theodore said sharply. I need deep background checks on everyone in my inner circle. Financial records, communications, meetings, everything. Going back 12 years. Sir, that's... Do it. And I want to know who's had access to my personal schedule for the past month. Someone knew Rose would be at that gala. Rose turned to him, eyes wide. The event company. Prestige Events. They called me 3 days ago, said someone had specifically requested me for your gala. I thought it was weird because I usually work smaller jobs, but the money was good, and I needed, she stopped. Oh God. It was a trap. Someone wanted us to meet, Theodore said grimly. Or they wanted to confirm Emma's existence. Or both. But why now? After 8 years of successfully hiding? Theodore looked at Emma, who was listening with the unnerving attention of a child who understands more than she should. How old are you, Emma? 8. I just turned 8 last month. And what happens when you turn 18? Rose gasped. The trust fund. Richard's will. Theodore nodded slowly. My father's will had provisions for any grandchildren. I know because I inherited everything, but the lawyers made a point of explaining that if any legitimate grandchildren were discovered, they'd be entitled to a percentage. A significant percentage. How significant? 20% of Strode Industries. Each. Rose's hand flew to her mouth. That's billions, Theodore finished. And if someone on the board knows or suspects Emma exists, and they've been embezzling or selling secrets for years, then Emma's claim to the company would trigger audits. Investigations. Everything they've been hiding would come to light. Rose pulled Emma closer, her face white with terror. They're not trying to use her as leverage. They're trying to eliminate her. The words settled over the vehicle like a death shroud. They went to the penthouse. Theodore's security team swept it twice before allowing them inside. The apartment was everything Rose's wasn't: marble floors, designer furniture, a view that cost more per month than most people made in a year. Emma walked through it like a museum, afraid to touch anything. You live here? She asked Theodore, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. All by yourself? Usually, yes. That's sad. It's too big for one person. Out of the mouths of babes. Rose stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the city. Theodore walked over to her, careful to leave space between them. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly. "Will we? Because it seems like we've just made everything worse. Running to you, coming here, if they didn't know for sure before, they will now. Your security team, the SUV, someone will have seen something. And now Emma's a target, and it's my fault for being stupid enough to take that catering job. It's not your fault. And I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you." Rose laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't promise that. You couldn't protect me 12 years ago, and you can't protect us now. Money and security teams aren't going to stop people who've been getting away with this for over a decade. Then what do you want me to do? Let you run again? Watch you disappear with my daughter to God knows where? She's been my daughter for 8 years while you were—" Rose stopped, pressing her lips together. "While I was what? Living my life? Building the company? I didn't know, Rose. You never told me. Your father asked me not to. And you just went along with it? No second thoughts? No wondering if maybe I deserved to know I was going to be a father? Of course I had second thoughts." Rose whirled on him, eyes blazing. "I had second thoughts every single day for 8 years. Every time Emma asked about her father, every time she saw other kids with dads, every time she drew a family picture with an empty space where you should have been. But I was protecting her, Theodore. That's what parents do. We make impossible choices and live with the consequences. I could have helped. Could have protected you both." "From whom? You didn't even know who the threat was. Your own father didn't know. All we had was paranoia and a warning, and I chose to believe it because the alternative was risking my daughter's life on the hope that maybe your father was wrong." She was breathing hard, tears streaming down her face, and Theodore realized this was the first time she'd been able to say any of this out loud. 8 years of secrets and fear and impossible decisions, finally given voice. "You're right," he said quietly. "You made the best choice you could with the information you had. And I'm not blaming you, Rose. I've missed 8 years of her life. I missed her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. I missed everything. I know." Rose's voice broke. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." They stood there in the silence, years of pain and regret hanging between them, until a small voice interrupted. "Are you guys going to get married now?" They both turned. Emma stood in the doorway to the kitchen, holding a juice box she'd found in the refrigerator, looking at them with an expression of intense curiosity. "What?" Rose managed. "Married. Like in the movies. When the mom and dad find each other again and there's crying and then kissing and then they get married." Emma took a sip of juice. "Is that what's happening?" Theodore made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "It's complicated, Emma. Adults always say that when they don't want to explain things." She walked over to them, standing between them, and took each of their hands. "Mrs. Chen says family is family, even when it's complicated. And we're family now, right? So we should probably figure out how to be less sad about it." Rose knelt down, cupping Emma's face in her hands. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't always listen." Emma looked at Theodore seriously. "Are you going to stay? Or are you going to leave like the dads on TV who have important business meetings?" The question was a knife to the heart. "I'm staying," Theodore said firmly. "For as long as you'll let me." "Both of you?" "Okay. Good." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Can I pick out a bedroom? This place has like 100 of them." Despite everything, Rose smiled. "Go ahead, baby. Pick whichever one you want." Emma scampered off, her footsteps echoing through the massive apartment, leaving Theodore and Rose alone again. "She's incredible," Theodore said. "She is." Rose wiped her eyes. "And she deserves better than this. Better than running and hiding and being afraid." "Then we end it. We find out who's been pulling the strings, we expose them, and we end this." "How?" Theodore pulled out his phone. "We do what they're afraid of. We make Emma's existence official. We file for her claim to the trust fund. We force them into the open." "That's insane. You'll be painting a target on her back." "The target's already there. This way, at least we control the narrative. We make it public, we involve lawyers and judges and media if we have to. The one thing corporate criminals hate is sunlight." Rose stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. My father left her that inheritance because he wanted to protect her, provide for her. We honor that by claiming it. And in the process, we trigger every audit and investigation needed to find whoever's been stealing from my company. And if they come after us before we can expose them?" Theodore stepped closer, taking her hand. "Then they'll have to go through me first. And Rose, I'm not my father. I'm not dying. I'm not going anywhere. You and Emma are under my protection now, and I don't care what it costs or who I have to destroy to keep you safe." What would you do in Rose's position? Trust Theodore or keep running? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. This story is about to take a turn nobody's going to see coming. Rose searched his face, looking for doubt or false promises. She must have found something she could believe in because she nodded slowly. "Okay. We do it your way. But Theodore, if this goes wrong, if something happens to Emma because we made her visible." "It won't. You can't know that." "No," he agreed. "But I can promise that I'll spend every resource I have, every favor I'm owed, every ounce of power I've accumulated, making sure she's safe. Our daughter deserves to live without fear. And she deserves to know her father." The word father settled over him like a mantle. Heavy. Terrifying. "Right." From somewhere in the apartment, Emma's voice rang out, "I found one. It has a window seat and everything. Can we paint it purple?" Rose smiled through her tears. "She's obsessed with purple." "Then we'll paint it purple. We'll paint the whole damn apartment purple if she wants." "Don't curse in front of her." "I didn't, she's not even in the room. Trust me, she hears everything." Rose squeezed his hand once, then let go. "I should go help her settle in. Figure out what we need. Clothes, her school books, her stuffed rabbit. She can't sleep without her rabbit, and it's back at the apartment. Give me a list. My people will get everything. Your people can't go back there. It's too dangerous. My people are trained professionals who make 6 figures a year specifically for situations like this. They'll be fine." Rose looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. Theodore could see it in the slope of her shoulders, the shadows under her eyes. She'd been running on adrenaline and terror for hours. Maybe for years. "Go," he said gently. "Be with Emma. I'll handle the logistics." "Theodore?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For not hating me. For believing me." "Rose, I could never hate you." The words came out more raw than he'd intended. "I tried. For years, I tried. It would have been easier. But I couldn't." Something flickered in her green eyes, recognition, regret, maybe the ghost of what they'd once had. Then she nodded and walked toward Emma's voice, leaving Theodore alone with his phone and his plans and the overwhelming realization that everything had changed. He had a daughter. He had enemies. And somewhere in his inner circle, people he'd trusted, worked with, built an empire alongside, someone wanted his child dead. Theodore pulled up his contact list and started making calls. By the time the sun set, he'd have answers. And by the time it rose again, he'd have justice. Or blood. Preferably both. The answers came faster than Theodore expected. By midnight, Daniel had compiled dossiers on all 12 members of Theodore's board of directors. By 2 a.m., a pattern had emerged. And by 3 a.m., Theodore was staring at evidence that made his blood run cold. Jeffrey Ham, his CFO, his father's oldest friend, the man who'd taught Theodore everything about corporate finance, had been systematically embezzling from Strode Industries for 15 years. The amounts were staggering. Carefully hidden, expertly laundered, but there. Millions siphoned off through shell companies, false acquisitions, inflated contracts. And the timeline matched perfectly. The embezzlement had accelerated dramatically 8 years ago, right after Richard Strode's death. But it was the offshore account transactions that made Theodore's hands shake. 3 days ago, the same day Rose had been called for the gala job, Jeffrey had transferred $2 million to a private security firm. The same firm whose vehicles had been watching Rose's apartment. Theodore was still processing this when his phone rang. Daniel's number, but the voice that spoke wasn't Daniel's. Mr. Strode. It was Victoria Corleone, his CFO, and date from the gala. Her voice was tight with something that might have been fear. We need to talk. In person. Alone. It's about your father. Victoria? What are you? I'm downstairs. Your night security let me up. Please. It's urgent. Theodore glanced toward the guest wing where Rose and Emma were sleeping, finally sleeping after Emma had insisted on showing him every single drawing in her backpack and Rose had tried to pretend she wasn't falling apart. 5 minutes, he said. Wait in the lobby. He met Victoria by the elevators. She looked terrible, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her makeup smudged, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her typical designer suits. She was carrying a manila envelope that she clutched like a lifeline. You shouldn't have come here, Theodore said. I know. But I couldn't, Theodore, I need to show you something. About Jeffrey. His blood went cold. What about him? He's been stealing from the company. 4 years. And I think, her voice dropped to a whisper. I think he killed your father. The world tilted. What? Victoria thrust the envelope at him. I've been investigating for months. Ever since I noticed irregularities in our acquisition budgets. I thought it was just accounting errors at first, but the deeper I dug, the more I found. And then I found these. Theodore opened the envelope. Inside were medical records. His father's medical records from the private clinic where he'd been treated in his final weeks. Your father was supposed to have 6 months, Victoria said. The cancer was aggressive but manageable with treatment. But he died in 3 weeks. Heart attack, the autopsy said. Except. She pulled out another document. A toxicology report. Theodore's hands began to shake as he read it. Digitalis poisoning, Victoria whispered. Someone was giving him digitalis. In small doses, mixed with his heart medication, it would mimic a heart attack perfectly. The initial autopsy missed it because no one was looking for it. But I had a friend at the medical examiner's office run the archived blood samples again. Theodore couldn't breathe. Jeffrey. He had access. He visited your father every day in those final weeks. And Theodore, your father knew. Look at this. She showed him another document. A memo, written in his father's handwriting, dated 2 days before his death. It was addressed to the company's legal team but never sent. Jeffrey Ham is to be removed from all positions of authority immediately upon my death. Full audit to be conducted. Evidence of malfeasance attached. Under no circumstances is he to have access to. The memo ended mid-sentence. As if Richard had been interrupted. Or had run out of time. He was trying to protect you, Victoria said. And the company. And that woman, Rose. The memo references her too. Says she's carrying the future and must be protected at all costs. I didn't understand what that meant until I saw you with her and the little girl at the gala. Theodore's mind was racing. Why are you showing me this now? Why not months ago when you first started investigating? Victoria's face crumpled. Because Jeffrey found out. 2 days ago, he confronted me. Said if I went to you with any of this, he'd make sure I was charged as an accessory. Said he had evidence I'd been helping him. Fabricated evidence, but it would be enough to destroy my career and put me in prison. So what changed? I saw them. The men he sent to that apartment building this morning. I have a contact in the security company, someone who owed me a favor. They told me Jeffrey ordered a cleanup operation. Theodore, he's not trying to blackmail you or leverage the little girl. He's trying to eliminate her. And anyone who knows she exists. The implications crashed over Theodore like a wave. You need to leave. Right now. If Jeffrey knows you're talking to me. He already knows. I'm sure of it. That's why I came here. It's the only place I might be safe. Victoria grabbed his arm. But you need to understand, Jeffrey isn't working alone. He can't be. Someone helped him poison your father. Someone helped him cover it up. And someone on your security team is feeding him information. Theodore's blood turned to ice. What? How else would he have known about Rose and Emma so quickly? You only found out last night, and by this morning he'd already mobilized a team. Someone close to you is reporting back to him. Theodore thought of Daniel. His head of security for 6 years. Loyal, professional, efficient. Too efficient. Oh God, he whispered. You can't trust anyone, Victoria said urgently. Not your security team, not your staff, not. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes fixed on something behind Theodore. He turned. Rose stood in the hallway, wearing one of his shirts over her jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. In her hand was a gun Theodore didn't know she owned. And it was pointed directly at Victoria. Rose, what are you? She's lying, Rose said, her voice deadly calm. About Jeffrey, about everything. Ask her why she was at Richard's clinic the day before he died. Ask her why her signature is on the medication logs. Victoria's face went white. That's ridiculous. I was there, Rose continued, stepping closer, the gun never wavering. I went to see Richard, to tell him about the pregnancy. And I saw you coming out of his room. You were crying. You didn't see me, but I saw you. And I saw you leave something on the nurse's station, a bottle of medication. Rose, put the gun down, Theodore said carefully. We can talk about this. She killed him, Theodore. Your father. She's been working with Jeffrey from the beginning. That's why she's really here, to find out how much we know and to finish what they started. Victoria laughed, but it was high-pitched, desperate. You're insane. I'm trying to help. I brought evidence, I risked everything to. To what? To frame Jeffrey while you get away with murder? Rose took another step forward. Richard told me before he died. He called me the night before, said he'd figured out who the traitor was. Said it was someone he'd loved like a daughter. Someone who'd been jealous of Theodore for years. Someone who thought she deserved the company more than he did. Theodore's mind was reeling. Victoria. His father had loved Victoria, had mentored her, had promoted her over more experienced candidates because he believed in her. And she'd killed him for it. Victoria, Theodore said slowly. Show me your hands. What? Theodore, you can't possibly believe. Your hands. Now. Slowly, Victoria raised her hands. And there, on her right ring finger, was a thin white line. The mark left by a ring worn for years and recently removed. You're wearing your father's ring, Rose said to Theodore. And I have mine. But there was a third one, wasn't there? Richard had 3 made. One for himself, one for Theodore, and one for the child he never had, Theodore finished, understanding dawning. The daughter he wished for. He gave it to you, didn't he, Victoria? Years ago, when he first hired you. Victoria's mask finally cracked. The fear and desperation melted away, replaced by cold fury. He promised me. He said I was brilliant, talented, that I'd go far. He said Strode Industries would be mine someday if I proved myself worthy. And then you, she pointed at Theodore. You came back from your little adventures abroad, and suddenly everything was about you. The prodigal son. The heir. I'd worked twice as hard, sacrificed everything, and it didn't matter because you had the right last name. So you killed him. I freed him. Victoria's voice was eerily calm now. From the cancer, from watching you run his company into the ground, from the disappointment of knowing his actual son was weak. And I would have had everything if it weren't for her, she gestured viciously at Rose. And her little mistake. A grandchild. An heir. Richard was going to change his will, did you know that? Going to leave everything to the baby. To your daughter. A child who didn't even exist yet, and suddenly I was nothing again. So you've been trying to kill Emma, Theodore said, his voice like ice. An 8-year-old child. An obstacle, Victoria corrected. Nothing personal. Just business. If you'd stayed hidden, she said to Rose, if you'd kept your mouth shut and your daughter invisible, none of this would have been necessary. But you got greedy. Started working high-profile jobs. Let the girl talk to strangers. You practically painted a target on her back. You're insane, Rose whispered. I'm practical. And I'm done talking. Victoria moved fast, faster than Theodore expected. Her hand went to her purse, and he saw the glint of metal. But Rose was faster. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Victoria screamed, her weapon clattering to the floor as she grabbed her shoulder, blood spreading across her sweater. Theodore was moving before he could think, grabbing Victoria's gun, kicking it away, pressing her against the wall even as she thrashed and screamed. Call the police, he barked at Rose. Now. But Rose wasn't moving. She stood frozen, the gun shaking in her hands, staring at Victoria with an expression of absolute horror. Mom? Emma's small voice cut through the chaos. She stood in the hallway, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. Mom, why are you holding a gun? Why is that lady bleeding? What's happening? Rose immediately dropped the weapon and rushed to her daughter, scooping her up, turning her away from the scene. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. But her voice was breaking, and Emma was crying, and Theodore was holding a bleeding woman who'd tried to murder his family, and nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. The police came. So did ambulances, crime scene investigators, Theodore's lawyers, a parade of officials that turned his penthouse into a circus. Through it all, Emma sat curled in Rose's lap on the couch, her face buried in her mother's shoulder, refusing to look at anyone. Theodore gave his statement mechanically. Victoria, high on pain medication and facing life in prison, confessed everything. The embezzlement. The murder. The attempted hit on Emma. Jeffrey Hem had been her accomplice, but she'd been the mastermind. And Daniel, loyal, efficient Daniel, had been feeding her information for years in exchange for a cut of the embezzled funds. By the time the sun rose, Victoria and Jeffrey were in custody, Daniel was in handcuffs, and Theodore's entire world had been dismantled and reassembled into something he barely recognized. He found Rose on the balcony, standing in the early morning light, her arms wrapped around herself. Is she asleep? He asked quietly. Rose nodded. Finally. I gave her the rabbit and sang her favorite song 3 times. She's exhausted. So are you. I shot someone, Theodore. In front of my daughter. She saw me shoot someone. You saved our lives. Victoria had a gun. If you hadn't. I know. I know all the logical arguments. But Emma doesn't understand logic. She just knows her mom used violence, and now she's terrified. Rose's voice cracked. I spent 8 years trying to keep her safe, trying to shield her from exactly this kind of trauma, and in one night, I destroyed all of it. Theodore stepped closer, wanting to touch her but not sure if he had the right. She'll recover. Kids are resilient. And she has you. She has both of us now. Does she? Because I don't even know what us means anymore. Rose turned to face him, and her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. Your father's dead because of me. Because he tried to protect me, tried to help me, and it got him killed. My father's dead because Victoria was a psychopath with a god complex. That's not on you. Isn't it? If I'd never gotten involved with you, if I'd just stayed a professional assistant and kept my distance, then I never would have known real love, Theodore interrupted. I never would have had Emma. And yes, the past 12 years have been hell, and yes, we've both lost things we can't get back. But Rose, I'm not sorry you existed in my life. I'm not sorry we created something beautiful together, even if the circumstances were complicated. Rose stared at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm so tired, Theodore. I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of making impossible choices. And I don't know how to just stop. This time, Theodore didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, finally letting herself break. He held her while she sobbed, her body shaking with 8 years of accumulated fear and grief and exhaustion. It's over, he whispered into her hair. The threat's gone. Victoria and Jeffrey are locked up. Daniel's been arrested. You're safe. Emma's safe. It's finally over. Is it? Because there's still the trust fund, and the inheritance claim, and the media circus when this goes public, and Emma's going to be in the spotlight, and we'll handle it. Together. You're not alone anymore, Rose. You don't have to be. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with those green eyes that had haunted him for 12 years. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be Emma's father. Publicly. Officially. I want to set up the trust fund my dad intended, and protect her inheritance, and paint her room purple, and pay for her art classes. I want to teach her about the company she'll inherit someday and take her to work and bore her with spreadsheets until she tells me to stop. Despite everything, Rose smiled slightly. She'd definitely tell you to stop. She hates math. Then I'll teach her other things. How to negotiate. How to read people. How to be strong and kind at the same time, like her mother. Theodore cupped Rose's face in his hands. And I want to figure out what we are. What we could be. If you'll let me. Theodore. I know it's complicated. I know we have a lot to work through. But Rose, I never stopped loving you. Not when you disappeared, not when I thought you'd betrayed me, not in 12 years of trying to forget. And now that I know the truth, now that I know you were protecting our daughter all along. He didn't get to finish because Rose kissed him. It was desperate and messy and tasted like tears, and it was the most perfect thing Theodore had felt in 12 years. He kissed her back, pouring everything he couldn't say into it, apology, promise, hope, love. When they finally pulled apart, Rose was crying and smiling simultaneously. We're probably making a terrible mistake. Probably, Theodore agreed. But I'm willing to risk it if you are. For Emma's sake. For all our sakes. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because this story isn't over yet, we've still got the resolution to come, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Rose leaned her forehead against his chest. Okay. We try. But slowly. Emma comes first, always. Always, Theodore agreed. She's the best thing either of us ever did. They stood there as the sun rose over the city, two people who'd lost each other and found their way back through the most unlikely circumstance, a little girl with honey-colored eyes and an observant nature, who'd noticed a ring and changed everything. Inside, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in her mother's memory, safe in a purple room in a tower above the city, unaware that her simple observation had unraveled a conspiracy, solved a murder, and brought her family together. Some heroes carried guns or wore capes. And some were 8 years old and just paid attention. 3 weeks later, everything fell apart again. The media had been brutal. Billionaire's secret love child, the headlines screamed. Corporate murder scandal rocks Strode Industries. Emma's face was everywhere, paparazzi camped outside Theodore's building, reporters shouting questions whenever they left. But it was the lawsuit that threatened to destroy everything. Victoria's family, wealthy, connected, vengeful, had filed an injunction blocking Emma's trust fund claim. They argued that Rose had manipulated Richard Strode, that the pregnancy had been a scheme, that Emma's paternity was questionable at best. The DNA test proved them wrong, but it didn't stop the court battles. Or the public scrutiny. Or the toll it was taking on Emma. Theodore came home to find Rose packing. "What are you doing?" She didn't look at him, just kept folding Emma's clothes into a suitcase. "We're leaving. Going to my aunt's place in Oregon. Just for a while until this dies down." "Rose, we talked about this. Running won't." "She hasn't smiled in 2 weeks, Theodore." Rose's voice broke. 2 weeks. She won't go outside because she's scared of cameras. She had a panic attack at school when a reporter tried to talk to her. She's 8 years old, and she's terrified to leave the apartment. So we get her a therapist. We increase security. We let her have a normal childhood. Rose whirled on him, eyes blazing with tears. "This isn't working. The money, the protection, the lawyers, none of it matters if she's miserable. I never should have let you claim her publicly. We should have stayed hidden." "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" Rose gestured around the penthouse. "Look at this place. It's a beautiful prison. Emma's trapped here, I'm trapped here, and you're trying so hard to be a father, but you don't know how. You buy her things instead of listening to her. You schedule quality time like it's a business meeting. You mean well, but Theodore, you're suffocating her." The words hit like physical blows. "That's not fair. Isn't it? Yesterday she asked if we could just go back to our old apartment. Do you know what she misses most? The fire escape. We used to sit out there and draw together, and she said it felt like freedom." Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't watch her lose herself to this life." "I won't." "So what, you're just going to take her and disappear again?" "If that's what she needs, yes." Theodore felt panic rising in his chest. "You can't. The custody arrangement." "There is no custody arrangement. You're not on her birth certificate. Legally, you have no rights." The statement hung between them like a knife. "I see." Theodore's voice went cold, distant, the corporate mask sliding back into place. "So this whole thing, letting me be her father, trying to make this work, that was just temporary? Until it got hard?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Rose? Because it sounds like the moment things aren't perfect, you're running. Again. Just like 12 years ago." Rose flinched. "That's not fair. None of this is fair. But I'm here, trying, fighting for us, for all of us, and you're packing a bag. Because she's suffering. She's adjusting. Kids are resilient, you said so yourself. Not this resilient. Not this much trauma." Rose was crying openly now. "I'm her mother. I know when she's reached her limit. And Theodore, she's breaking. I can see it. And I have to choose her over everything else. Even you." The words shattered something in Theodore's chest. "Don't make me choose between letting you go and fighting you in court. You wouldn't. Try me. She's my daughter too. I've lost 8 years. I'm not losing another day." Rose stared at him with something like horror. "Who are you?" "The man I fell in love with would never threaten me." "The man you fell in love with didn't know he had a daughter." Everything's different now. You're right. It is. Rose zipped the suitcase closed. Emma's at her therapy appointment. I'm picking her up in an hour, and we're leaving. You can have your lawyers call mine. You don't have lawyers. Then I'll get some. With your money, since apparently that's all you think matters. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. I thought we could make this work. I really did. But you're so busy trying to give her everything that you can't see you're taking away what she needs most. Which is peace. Safety. A life where she's just a kid, not a media spectacle or a trust fund or a corporate heir. Rose walked to the door, then paused. I loved you, Theodore. I think part of me always will. But I love her more. And right now, you're hurting her. So I'm making the choice your father asked me to make 8 years ago. I'm protecting our daughter. Even if it means protecting her from you. She left. Theodore stood alone in his penthouse, his beautiful, empty penthouse, and felt the world collapse around him for the second time in his life. His phone buzzed. A message from his lawyer. Victoria's family has filed another motion. They're claiming emotional distress and demanding Emma be removed from your custody for her own safety. Theodore stared at the message, then at the packed suitcase Rose had left behind in her rush. Emma's stuffed rabbit sat on top. She never went anywhere without that rabbit. Which meant Rose was coming back for it. Which meant Theodore had maybe an hour to figure out how to save his family. Or lose them forever. What should Theodore do? Let them go or fight to keep them? Tell me in the comments what you would do. He made his decision. Grabbing his keys and the rabbit, Theodore headed for the door. Not to the therapist's office where he could intercept them. Not to his lawyers where he could file countermotions. To the one place that might actually matter. Emma's old apartment building. The one with the fire escape. If he was going to lose everything, he'd at least understand what he was losing. And maybe, just maybe, figure out how to become the father his daughter actually needed. Instead of the one he thought she deserved. The fire escape was exactly as Rose had described it, rusted metal clinging to crumbling brick, a death trap by any safety standard. Theodore sat on it anyway, 3 stories above the alley, and tried to see what Emma saw. Freedom. From up here, the city looked different. Smaller. The noise of traffic faded to white noise. A bird landed on the railing, completely unafraid. Theodore could see into windows, families eating dinner, kids doing homework, ordinary lives being lived without security teams or paparazzi. He pulled out his phone and called someone he should have called weeks ago. Marcus? It's Theodore. I need advice, and I need you to be honest. Marcus Chen, his college roommate, now a child psychologist, sighed. About your daughter? Theodore, I've been waiting for you to call. How did you? It's all over the news. And more importantly, I know you. You're probably trying to solve this like a business problem. Am I right? Theodore's silence was answer enough. Thought so. Okay, here's the truth, you're overwhelming her. Too much change, too fast, too public. That child went from anonymity to being the center of a media circus overnight. She needs stability, routine, and the freedom to just be a kid. That's what Rose said. Rose is right. Listen to her, she's been doing this for 8 years. You've been a father for 3 weeks. Marcus paused. What does Emma actually want, Theodore? Not what you think she should want. What does she want? Theodore realized with crushing clarity that he didn't know. He'd been so busy providing, protecting, proving himself that he'd never actually asked. I have to go, he said. He drove to the therapist's office, arriving just as Rose and Emma walked out. Emma's eyes were red from crying. Rose's face went hard when she saw him. Theodore, I told you. I know what you told me. But I need 5 minutes with Emma. Please. He knelt down in front of his daughter. Emma, I have your rabbit. And I have a question. Emma took the stuffed animal, clutching it tight. What question? What do you want? Not what your mom wants, not what I want. If you could have anything in the world right now, what would it be? Emma looked at her mother, then back at Theodore. You promise you won't be mad? I promise. I want to go home. To our real home. With the fire escape and Mrs. Chen next door and my old school where nobody knows who my dad is. Her voice got smaller. I like having a dad. I really do. But I don't like being famous. It's scary. Theodore felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. Okay. Okay? Okay. We'll figure it out. Together. All three of us. He looked at Rose. I'm sorry. You were right. I was trying to give her my world when what she needed was to keep hers. Rose's eyes filled with tears. Theodore. Come back to the penthouse. Just for tonight. And tomorrow we'll make a new plan. One where Emma's happiness comes first, not my ego or your fear. Can we try that? Emma looked at her mother. Can we, Mom? Rose wiped her eyes and nodded. Yeah, baby. We can try. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, Theodore and Rose sat on his balcony with coffee and honesty. I want to be in her life, Theodore said. But on her terms. If that means I visit you at your apartment instead of you living here, fine. If it means we keep my identity private until she's older, fine. Whatever Emma needs. She needs her father, Rose said softly. Just not the version you've been trying to be. She doesn't need a billionaire or a protector or someone who fixes everything. She needs someone who sits on fire escapes and listens. I can do that. Can you? Because it means letting go of control. Trusting me to make decisions without consulting lawyers. Being a partner, not a boss. Theodore took her hand. Teach me. I'll get it wrong sometimes, but I'll learn. If you'll let me. Rose squeezed his fingers. We're in this together. For real this time. For real, Theodore agreed. And for the first time in 3 weeks, the future didn't look like a battle. It looked like possibility. The solution came from the most unexpected source, Emma herself. 2 days later, she walked into Theodore's office, her first visit since the fight, carrying a drawing. She placed it on his desk with the solemnity of a lawyer presenting evidence. I made a plan, she announced. The drawing showed 3 stick figures. One labeled Mom at a small apartment. One labeled me with arrows pointing to both locations. One labeled Dad at a tall building. We don't all have to live together, Emma explained. Lots of kids have 2 houses. I could stay with Mom during the week for school, and visit you on weekends. And nobody has to know you're my dad until I'm ready to tell them. Theodore stared at his 8-year-old daughter, who'd just solved in 5 minutes what lawyers couldn't fix in 3 weeks. That's actually brilliant. I know, Emma said matter-of-factly. Also, I want you to fix Mom's building. The heat doesn't work, and Mrs. Chen's bathroom has mold. You're rich. You could buy the whole building and make it nice without making us move. Rose, standing in the doorway, laughed through her tears. Emma, you can't just tell people to buy buildings. Why not? He bought me a pony. You bought her a what? Rose turned to Theodore. It's at a stable in Connecticut. I thought, he stopped at Rose's expression. That's exactly what you meant about overwhelming her, isn't it? Yes, Theodore. That's exactly what I meant. Emma giggled, the first genuine laugh Theodore had heard from her in weeks. Can we keep the pony though? I named her Purple. Of course you did, Rose muttered, but she was smiling. The court hearing was 3 days later. Victoria's family had pushed for full transparency, hoping to paint Theodore as an unfit father. Instead, they got something they didn't expect, unity. Rose testified first, calm and clear. Theodore Strode is learning to be a father, just like I learned to be a mother. He makes mistakes, but he listens. He cares more about Emma's happiness than his pride. That's all any child really needs. Then Theodore took the stand. I'm not asking for custody. I'm asking for the right to be Emma's father, at her pace, on her terms. My daughter is wise enough to know what she needs. I'm just trying to be wise enough to listen. The judge, a woman with kind eyes and 30 years on the bench, looked at Emma, sitting between her parents, holding both their hands. Young lady, do you feel safe with your father? Emma nodded. He's learning. Mom says everybody needs practice at new things. And do you want him in your life? Yes. He's kind of awkward, but I like him. Plus he bought me a pony. The courtroom rippled with laughter. Even the judge smiled. Motion denied, she said, looking at Victoria's lawyers. This family is working together to prioritize the child's welfare. Mr. Strode's parental rights are recognized. The trust fund will be established per Richard Strode's will. And I'm issuing a protection order, no media contact with the minor child without parental consent. This circus ends today. Her gavel fell like a benediction. Outside the courthouse, Theodore knelt in front of Emma. Thank you for giving me a chance. You're welcome. But Dad? She smiled at the word, the first time she'd used it. No more surprise ponies. Ask first, okay? Deal, Theodore laughed, pulling her into a hug. Rose watched them, her heart full, as cameras flashed in the distance, but far enough away that Emma didn't flinch. They were going to be okay. Different than planned, messier than expected, but okay. Together. 6 months later, Emma's art show opened at the community center near her old apartment. The building Theodore had bought, and renovated, now housed 12 families in updated apartments with working heat, new appliances, and a community space on the ground floor. Mrs. Chen had been the first to volunteer to manage it, declaring Theodore not completely hopeless for a billionaire. Emma's artwork covered the walls. Watercolors of fire escapes and city birds, sketches of her mother reading, a portrait of Theodore labeled, "My dad, he's still learning but he's getting better." Theodore stood in front of that last piece, his throat tight. She's talented, Victoria Corleone's mother said quietly, appearing at his elbow. Theodore tensed, but the older woman raised her hand. I'm not here to cause trouble. I came to apologize. For my daughter. For the lawsuit. For everything. Mrs. Corleone. Victoria confessed everything to me last week. The jealousy, the poison, the years of lies. I raised a monster, and I'm sorry your family paid the price. She looked at Emma, who was showing her art to a group of children. That little girl deserves better than what my daughter tried to do to her. Better than what I tried to do in court. She has it now, Theodore said simply. That's what matters. The woman nodded and left, and Theodore realized something had shifted. The anger he'd carried for months had dissolved into something softer. Not forgiveness exactly, but peace. Rose appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. You okay? Yeah. Actually, I am. They'd been taking it slow, dinners once a week, family outings on weekends, rebuilding trust brick by brick. Last week, Theodore had finally told Rose he loved her. She'd said it back. They hadn't figured out all the details yet, marriage, living arrangements, the future. But they were figuring it out together, and that was enough. Mom. Dad. Come look. Emma waved them over to a new painting she'd just hung. It showed 3 figures on a fire escape, looking at stars. The label read, My Family, the Complicated Kind. It's perfect, Rose whispered. It really is, Theodore agreed. Later that night, after the show ended and Emma fell asleep in the car between them, Theodore carried his daughter up to Rose's apartment, their apartment, technically, since he owned the building, but it would always be Rose's home first. He tucked Emma into bed, kissing her forehead. Good night, sweetheart. Night, Dad. Will you come to my soccer game Saturday? Wouldn't miss it. Good. We're terrible, but Mom says trying is what matters. Theodore laughed. Your mom is very wise. I know. That's why I keep her around. In the kitchen, Rose made tea while Theodore reviewed the trust fund paperwork his lawyers had finalized. Emma's inheritance was secure, managed by an independent board until she turned 25. Enough to give her choices without overwhelming her childhood. She asked me today if we were going to get married, Rose said suddenly. Theodore looked up. What did you tell her? That grown-ups are complicated, and some questions take time to answer. Rose sat across from him. But Theodore, I think I know my answer. If you're asking. I've been wanting to ask for months. I was just waiting for the right moment. There's never a perfect moment. There's just, now. Theodore reached across the table, taking her hand. Rose DeWitt Dawson, will you marry me? Slowly, on your terms, whenever you're ready? No pressure, no timeline, just, eventually? Rose laughed, tears streaming down her face. That's possibly the worst proposal in history. I know. I'm still learning. Yes, she said. Eventually. When we're ready. When Emma's ready. Yes. Theodore kissed her across the table, tasting tea and tears and the future they were building together, imperfect, complicated, and absolutely right. 1 year later. The wedding was small. Emma as flower girl in a purple dress, Mrs. Chen as the officiant, she'd gotten certified online specifically for this, and 20 people who actually mattered. No media. No circus. Just family. Theodore's vows were simple, I promise to keep learning. To listen more than I fix. To love you both exactly as you are. Rose's were simpler, I promise to let you. Finally. Emma's, because of course they let her speak, were the best, I promise not to get any more ponies without asking Mom first. Also, I'm really happy you guys figured this out because it was getting awkward. The guests laughed. Theodore cried. Rose smiled like she'd finally stopped running. And when they walked out of the courthouse, the same one where they'd fought for Emma's rights, as a family, legally and completely, Emma looked up at her parents and said, Can we get ice cream now? All this love stuff is making me hungry. Some things, Theodore had learned, were exactly that simple. 5 years later. Theodore sat on the fire escape of Rose's building, their building, watching the sunset with Emma, now 13 and already taller than her mother. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? That you missed my first 8 years? Theodore considered lying, considered softening it. But Emma deserved the truth. Every single day. But I try to focus on what I didn't miss instead. Your first soccer goal. Your first art show. The day you called me Dad for the first time. I can't change the past, Em. I can only show up for the future. Emma leaned against his shoulder. That's very wise. Mom's rubbing off on you. Your mom makes me better. Gross. But also sweet. Emma pulled out her sketchbook. I'm doing a project for school. About family. Can I interview you? Of course. Okay. Question 1. What's the most important thing you've learned about being a father? Theodore thought about it. About the mistakes and the growth. About the fire escapes and the ponies. About the learning curve that never really ended. That love isn't about being perfect, he said finally. It's about showing up. Listening. Trying. And when you mess up, because you will mess up, it's about saying sorry and doing better. Your mom taught me that. You taught me that. Emma wrote it down carefully. Question 2. If you could go back and change anything, would you? Not anymore. Because changing anything might mean not having this exact moment. Right here. With you. That's really sappy, Dad. I know. I'm old. We're allowed to be sappy. Emma laughed, that bright, unself-conscious sound that still caught Theodore off guard with its beauty, and kept sketching. Below them, Rose came out of the building with grocery bags, looked up, and waved. Theodore waved back, his heart full. He'd built an empire, amassed a fortune, conquered corporate wars and survived conspiracies. But this, sitting on a fire escape with his daughter while his wife smiled up at them, this was the only victory that mattered. Hey Dad? Yeah, Em? I'm glad that lady noticed your ring. At the party. 5 years ago. Theodore smiled. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Even though it was super dramatic and people got shot and there was a whole court thing? Even though all of that. Cool. Emma went back to her sketching. For the record, I always knew that you were my dad. Even before I asked. How? Mom kept your picture in her drawer with the ring. She thought I didn't know, but I saw it. You had the same smile I did when I looked in the mirror. Emma glanced at him. I used to imagine what you were like. If you'd like me. If you'd want me. Theodore pulled her close. I would have loved you from the first second I knew you existed. I do love you. More than anything. I know that now. Emma hugged him back. You're kind of extra about everything, but I know you love us. Extra? It's a compliment. Mostly. They sat there as the sun set over the city, father and daughter, still learning each other after 5 years, probably still learning each other in 50 more. And that was okay. Because the best things in life weren't the ones that came easy. They were the ones worth fighting for. Worth waiting for. Worth learning for. One fire escape conversation at a time. Final scene. That night, after Emma went to bed, Theodore and Rose sat on their own balcony. They'd finally moved into a house with a proper yard and a studio for Emma's art, but they'd kept the apartment for Mrs. Chen and visits to the old neighborhood. She asked me today when we're having another baby, Rose said casually. Theodore nearly dropped his wine. She what? Relax. I told her maybe someday, but probably not. One brilliant, observant, slightly manipulative child is enough. She gets that from you. She absolutely does not. She gets her dramatic flair from you. Rose smiled. But Theodore, thank you. For these 5 years. For learning. For trying. For being exactly what we needed, even when you didn't know what that was. Thank you for giving me the chance. For not giving up when I was terrible at this. You were never terrible. Just, enthusiastic. Is that what we're calling the pony incident now? Rose laughed, and Theodore pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Somewhere in the house, Emma was probably still awake, drawing or reading or plotting her next big question. In the morning, there would be breakfast chaos and school drop-off and a million small moments that made up a life. A complicated, messy, beautiful life. Built on a foundation of a little girl's observation, a mother's courage, and a father's determination to be worthy of the family he'd found. Excuse me, sir, Theodore murmured, echoing Emma's words from that night 5 years ago. My daughter and my wife own my whole heart. Rose looked up at him, eyes shining. Good answer, Mr. Strode. I've been practicing. I can tell. They kissed under the stars, and inside, Emma smiled in her sleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, her family finally complete. The end. Thank you so much for following this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. Was it Emma's first observation? The confrontation with Victoria? The fire escape conversations? I love hearing from you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because there are so many more stories like this coming. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, family isn't always simple, love isn't always easy, but the things worth having are always worth fighting for. See you in the next story. Red Heart.